Namaste, everyone. Good evening. Welcome all to this evening's filter coffee session with a very interesting author, Manu Nellutla ji. He's the author of Janya Bharata series. This is the first book in the series, Janya Bharata, the War. That is how he has covered a very interesting subject about how the commoners were during the Mahabharata era. It's a journey in itself. So we'll get to hear from him on this. Let me introduce you to Manu Nellutla ji. Manu Nellutla is an Indo-Canadian author of the Janya Bharata series. He has a varied work experience over the past 2 decades as a physiotherapist, academician, researcher, ergonomist, health and safety professional, and an executive leader. He has worked in India, Verandah before moving to Canada. He's right now in Vancouver and it's 7:30 a.m. right now. And he's having his nice filter coffee while we are having this program. Nice to see that, sir. He calls himself a lifelong learner and has varied academic educational credentials in physiotherapy, education, ergonomics, sustainability, project management, business administration and leadership from universities like Rajiv Gandhi, University of Health Sciences, University of British Columbia, Australian Institute of Business, Harvard Business School, and MIT Sloan School of Management. Wonderful, sir. A multilinguist. He's a polyglot. As I spoke to him this morning, he is fluent in, I think, 4 languages, and two other languages he can converse. So that's what I could make out. He can speak, read, and write fluently in Telugu, Hindi, English, and Gujarati while able to have basic conversations in Kannada and Malayalam, and Oriya too. His interest in history, especially ancient civilizations, took him on to the journey of writing the fictional story of Janya Bharata. This is the first book, Janya Bharata, the War. He's currently working on the second book, which is Janya Bharata, the Deluge. Apart from his professional work and writing books, Manuji is also a singer, podcast host, and a radio jockey. Very, very interesting personality we have today. He is also an accomplished speaker, delivering talks, lectures in various platforms, including in the TEDx platform titled Learning from Third World Countries. Manu has been included in the list of British Columbia Book World's Who's Who list for 2022 and Daily Wire's top 50 most influential authors of 2022. I got to read his book and it is available online, and it is a thoroughly entertaining book. And if I urge you all to watch this show, understand the journey of his writing and also interesting insights into Mahabharata, and probably buy the book and enjoy reading. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate.
Welcome. So I'll start with the questions. What inspired you to write?
Well, I mean, as we all read books about various books, right? And we always get excited and curious about the way they are presented, whether it's fiction or even non-fiction too. There is a lot of art that goes into in writing and presenting the information in the right way, so that audiences are attracted to it and they're drawn towards that story, right? So I came across various books on our culture. When I say on our culture, it's more the Indian culture, the Bharata culture that I come from. Though I'm in Canada, I still appreciate our culture and I respect our culture. So once I was out of Canada, out of India, I moved out of India in around 2007. I mean, before that I was there too, but they always say you don't appreciate when you're there, but you only appreciate once you leave your place, right? So I started appreciating more about our culture once I was out of India, and started reading more about our culture, our ancient history, recent history, political history, independence. You go from current to the back and back and back, and I started understanding that uh, like Indian culture is one of the unique cultures in the world which has sustained over a millennia, like thousands of years. Like I'm in Canada, and First Nations here, they struggle because their culture is not around. Like it has been totally been annihilated by the colonial thing, powers, right? And within 200-300 years. So I look at Indian culture and see how well it has sustained itself and continued it. So I started reading more about that culture, our culture, appreciated the culture, started reading the ancient texts. And when I say texts, it also means the itihasa, which is the history. I always call it history, though people call it mythology or mythology. I appreciate it as a history because the way it's presented could be different, but it happened,
Yes.
right? So the way it's presented with all the glorified nature of the books could be different, or the way it was written and the way we understand could be different. So that could be different, but I appreciated the history part of it. And as I started learning and understanding further about that, I wanted to research further on Mahabharata. So as you all know, Mahabharata is about the epic, the Kuru family, and the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and of course um, um, with the introduction, or you can say the participation of Krishna from Dwaraka too, right? So it's a more like a pan-Indian in that at that time. If you think Dwaraka is a Western India and Northern India and etc., it's a pan-Indian from Anga from from Bengal side of the things, from the eastern side. So it's more like a pan-Indian side of things. So which is wonderful as an epic and as a history. But as I was reading that, my point was it was concentrating more on the Kuru family and etc. Yes, but if we want to see it as our culture and our history, we should dig further about what was happening across India during that time, right? Otherwise, it's just a book. It's a mythological book. But if we understand, if we appreciate it as our culture and our history, then we need to question it. And our culture encourages us to question it, right? So I questioned it and I said that, okay, wonderful. What was happening across India then? What were my ancestors doing? So I hail from Telangana. If you all don't know where I hail from, I hail from Telangana. And I was like, what were my ancestors, let's say 2000 years back or 5000 years back, were doing in India at that time? Right? So during Mahabharata time, what was happening with my people? So that was kind of the question that came in, and I started researching, and I couldn't find much, though I could find snippets of archaeological evidence here and there, a bit of names here and there, but they only go for a few thousands of years. So that's what inspired me to start. I didn't want all my research to go wasted, and then I thought, well, I don't have enough data or evidence also to say that it's a historical thing and start writing from a non-fictional point of view. So I started viewing it in a fictional way in my own imaginations. So what would I do? What would I do if I was there during Mahabharata, right? So I started thinking and imagining what would I do if I was called upon to the war. And so with that inspiration, I thought, let me write this book and write it in a fictional way. But of course, ensuring that the research I did and the trueness. I want to be truthful to the Mahabharata text too. So I wanted to make sure that I introduce the timelines, the characters, some of them, and weave my fictional story into them. And that's how the Janya Bharata, the concept of Janya Bharata started. And Janya Bharata, Janya means common. It's not Maha. Yes, there is a Mahabharata, but ours is also a Janya Bharata, commoner's perspective, right? So all this led me to get inspired to write this book too, like because I wanted it to be, when I got this idea, I was like, are others thinking about the same thing in India? Like, are others interested in the same thing? Let's get it out. And that inspired me to continue. And here it is. the book is out, and I'm excited and happy people are reading it and appreciating it.
Wonderful. Partly you have answered my second question also, Manuji, but I would like to know, this is being your first book. This is your first book. So
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
there must have been a tipping point of how you chose this subject, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
first book could be anything, but why this is this you where you I mean you start off in your acknowledgement the very perhaps in the 80s India we all grew up in this nice set of lines you have written. I just like to read. Remembering my uncle Rasika and my grandparents Narasimha and Saraswati, with whom I used to watch Mahabharata television series in my childhood, I dedicate this book to them. Profound in two ways. One is how Mahabharata and Ramayana shaped our lives in the 80s as we grew up. Second is I am deeply moved the way you have acknowledged the family roots that have shaped you. You really one needs that family foundation strong enough to get out a work like this.
Thank
Fantastic,
you.
fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for appreciating that. I mean, as you said, like we all grew up in those 80s and 90s, and the television, especially the Mahabharata and the Ramayana series, were the ones we watched and grew up with, and and see what you learn in your childhood is something that you stay on, you hang on with, right? As even if, as you grow. If you ask current generation, they will talk about Shaktiman probably as a series. So if you ask my generation, at least, I don't want to know about ages here. We don't want to uh, talk about the age of ourselves here,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
ages of us. But like if you think about the way we grew up, Mahabharata and Ramayana series did impact us, and I watched them. I was very young when I was with my grandparents and uncle, that with whom I grew up, and we used to watch them, and it's exciting. Sunday, I think Sunday morning it used to come, and it's a whole thing. Like you even finish off your breakfast, or you take shower, and because you need to be very fresh for the series too. That's how it used to be, like more dedicated. So I mean, that's inspirational to understand. As a child, your imagine your the television series takes your imagination and puts into in a vision way, in a watchable way, right? And the war, you hear about this epic war, and they tried their best to show that war. With arrows and all those, with all the CGIs of that time.
That time,
But of
yes.
course, it overall it impacts you as a child. And as I grew up, and as I mentioned, once I started reading more about it, I understood the depth of how they explained in the books of Mahabharata and Ramayana. What we read is most of the time the versions of them, different adapted versions. Even the Mahabharata serial is an adapted version, so I can add anything into that to add a bit of drama or something into that. But the actual Mahabharata, if you can start reading the Veda Vyasa, it's online. I mean, that's how I got all the. I mean, somebody has done a great job of putting. Internet has helped us a lot. So I started reading it, and that's what I'm saying. I wanted to appreciate our culture and the books and the way it's written, and I wanted to present my side of the thing too. That the question that came up, because any question that comes up shouldn't be unanswered, and my question was a bit answered because I could get some evidence on what was happening during that time at other areas, but it was still unanswered. And I wanted to make sure that people out there who also had the same question have at least should at least read this. And I want people to get inspired and say and do their own research. It's not that I only want people to read my book. No, I want them to do further research and find out actually what was happening across India during Mahabharata war. If right now, if you see the war between the World War II, I'll take an example as the biggest war the world has seen, at least so far in the recent history, how it affected the economies, how it affected populations, countries were divided, everything. So many men lost. And they say in 18 days, like millions of men lost their lives in 18 days. So that's a huge effect on economy, on geography, on on population, right? So that was my tipping point to say that okay, let's bring it out, the concept of like how others were looking at we always see black and white. I mean, there were so many books on Indian epics, right? Like I saw Jaya, I saw Ajaya, I read Amish Tripaঠি's books on how different books, in different context, on how the same history or mythological stories can be presented too, right? And uh, but nowhere I saw it's always black and white. It's always plus or minus. It's always heroes and villains. But what about the third factor, third people who the third party who are actually participating in those areas, right? Like for example, one of the interesting question I always had was the person who questioned, the Dhobi who questioned Sita's about Sita when they came back from Lanka, and again, this is from my movie from Lavakusha, so I still need to read the book properly, Ramayana. But the Dhobi who questioned uh, Sita's chastity, right? And that's when Rama said Sita has to go to Vanavasa and like all that that is written. My question was, what happened to Dhobi's family? Like, if you question somebody at this current situation, you're like, you can't question, right? Like, you will be like, you will be banished and all those things. So what happened to their family? Like, see, these kind of questions nobody think when we normally don't think, because we always look at black and white, plus or minus, right? So that's why I wanted to read this, and I wanted to present a different perspective and say there are people, if we believe that these things happened in our culture and we believe that this is our history, then we should also think and read more about and find out more about what was happening across India for different cultures. So long answer short, yeah, I mean, that's my tipping point. I wanted to bring this out and appreciate what we have as culture.
Wonderful, Andy. So how was this experience of writing your first book? How did you just start writing, or did you decide that you will write so many words a day, pages a day, or was there a theme that you to-do task, or how was it, sir? Because as young authors who are wanting to be inspired by people like you, your experience will be a guiding light.
Well, first of all, thanks for asking me that question, because I'm also a very debutant writer, but
No, but
I
nonetheless,
appreciate.
the writing is superb. So, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that.
I appreciate that. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like your words, kind words there. But yeah, from my end, I would say that I didn't have a kind of a. I read about how people. I used to read, watch videos on how to be a writer, what to write, etc. But then they all talk about write this many words, do something, make sure that you type and etc. For me, it was more about I didn't get the spark. Once you get the spark, sometimes you will sit there for 2 hours and typing like 20 pages. And if you didn't get the spark or the imagination, there were times for some weeks I didn't type anything because
Okay.
I wasn't getting the right way I wanted to present.
Okay.
Right. And of course, I used to kind of write very drafts, like what this chapter could be like, and what this section could be like. I would just say, for example, in the story, not if many of you have not read it yet, but just as a snippet of that, like for example, they go to Kurukshetra. They're somewhere called Devasthana in south central India, let's say, close to Godavari River. They have to go to Kurukshetra. So in my book, when I started drafting, it will be like, okay, they go from Devasthana to Kurukshetra. That's it. Fine. That's my first point. Then how much is actually the distance between Devasthana and Kurukshetra? So I actually did my research from Godavari to Kurukshetra, how many kilometers it is. And if somebody drives in a car, how much time it takes. If somebody walks, how much time it takes. and then I started driving. So it takes 3 days to go from Godavari to Kurukshetra. Wonderful. But these are soldiers, so maybe a bit faster, and they were called upon. So maybe they were pacing faster. So then it starts expanding. So what were the areas they were going through? Oh, there was Nishada kingdom. There was, there are Pulinda kingdoms and all the kingdoms that come in between based on the ancient maps that we have. There is the Dandakaranya, right? Like in between. So how were they going through the forest? Where were they camping? So there you go. You start adding few sentences here and there. Your one line that they have to go from Devasthana as a Kurukshetra becomes 1 pager, 1.5 pager as a skeleton of that, right? And that's when you start again writing how and what were they thinking as they were walking. oh, like I have to go to this war, I may never come back. So what were the thought process in their minds of soldiers when they were called upon to this war? It's not that when we read Mahabharata or any text or any historical books, we say, oh, two clans, they fought. Wonderful. But there is so much preparation that happens.
Yes.
There is so much enthusiasm versus excitement versus anxiety, right? So I wanted to bring those feelings out in that. So that's how I started writing. Again, as I mentioned, like I started with the chapter, kind of the skeleton, and the book evolved too. I knew what was the beginning. I knew that they were called upon the war. This is what happens after the
So
war.
you had a basic structure and you
Basic.
started. Okay.
Yes, but then some of them were additions because I didn't want to just put Mitrajit in the protagonist in this book, Mitrajit. I didn't want him to be portrayed as like, why is he so confused sometimes to take a decision? Well, I need to give him some background, right? Like what happened? Why is he always why doesn't he like fighting, though he's a good swordsman? So I wanted to give him a context of what happened to his father, or what he saw as a child when others were attacking their village. So all that, it builds up the psyche of that character, right? So then I started adding a bit more into that, and then I wanted to make sure I stay true to the facts, that what happened on the first day of the war, what happened to the second day of the war, what formation was there. So a lot of research plus snippets of fiction plus background story and all that. And actually, if interesting part is the Ustra Karnikas were actually a tribe who fought for Kauravas. If you read Mahabharata, they are listed as one of the kingdoms who actually fought. So I try to keep that research true to the book while adding up, and it adds up. As I mentioned, like it's not like you need to sit and write something. No, draft page, 60, 70, 50, 60 pages was my first draft of the whole book. Then I sent to my sister, my dad, my parents, my wife, and I'm like, read them. What do you think?
Fantastic.
Like, yeah, that's interesting. That looks very good, but I didn't understand why this person is acting like this or something like that. Oh, that sparks me to write. You know what? I need to give a background. Somebody didn't understand the war much because they couldn't understand the fighting. Oh, I need to what do you say? Break it down further down to make it understandable that somebody is attacking from this side. This is how you form. This is how you run. There is cloud of dust because it's not clear when everybody's running in the war. So yes. I wanted to clear that cloud of dust. So it's again, it's start from somewhere. Start from somewhere. Write down if point one. They start from, as I mentioned, point, just write something. They start from Devasthana, reach Kurukshetra. That's your first line. And then you start thinking, okay, how will they reach from Devasthana to Kurukshetra? Now start doing the research. Now start entering the information. Start talking about geography as they walk. Talk about the day and night, how the weather systems change, because from south to north it becomes cooler. How were they thinking? So when you add, and were they dressed in the same way as they were at home? No, they would be in a different attire. So there is so many concepts you can keep on adding and increase that one point from this to this into that. So that's what I wrote as a writer. That's what my journey was. Of people may be different, but this is how I wrote.
What is your very nice, Andy? What is your take on how well we were advanced in terms of strategy, warfare? Of course, the epic is beautiful, no doubt. But as a writer of Janya Bharata, you must have had a lot of doubts. Maybe you would have filled in some gaps here and there about how the technology was back then. Communication, because if they're going from Godavari to Kurukshetra, back home, how would they have been communicating? And any insights into that?
Absolutely. I mean, see, the way Mahabharata is written or the way we write, sometimes we may not understand. I'll give you an example. Let's take somebody let's say 1950s. Okay, my own grandfather, let's say from 90, if he was still there, okay, and explain to him what a cell phone does. right? Like let's take an example. Let's take our grandfathers or our great grandfathers and explain to them how a cell phone works, a mobile phone works. They will never understand because they are not able to conceptualize how a cell phone works. Similarly, I feel that the way they explain the advancements in the war, or the weapons they talk about, or the Maya Sabha they talk about, right? Like, we cannot understand we cannot conceptualize that in this present moment because we are not in that context there. Similarly, our grandfathers, etc., they cannot conceptualize what a cell phone looks like. And if you notice this, all these advancements in our recent history, in our recent times, happened in the past 150 years. Right? So even if you take somebody from 1700s, right, and tell them, hey, by the way, we are going to do a Zoom meeting in this way, they'll be like, what the hell? What are you talking about? We need to send by a pigeon, right? The information. So again, the concepts are evolving. They were different in different generations, right? Like if you see Kailasha temple in Ellora caves, how is that built so many years back? How is it even possible scientifically? Right? But there were advancements at that time that we cannot understand right now, and they've had those advancements at the same time. So for me, the way I read the book, I saw that there were various advancements and tried to introduce. For example, two things. One thing, you asked about communication. So any kingdoms, any what to say, places, when they go for war, they always want to keep communication open because they want to make sure that either they need resources to support them further, or they need to inform that, hey, we are winning or we are losing, or it will be done in a few days. So in my book, actually, I did mention about that and say that, they think about, okay, we came here, wonderful. Now we're going to war, but we totally forgot about how to communicate back. So, but yeah, Kalinga, for example, because it was a much more advanced kingdom at that time compared to Ustrakarnika's kingdom, the protagonist's tribe. I wanted to showcase that, hey, see, yours is a tribe coming together, Ustrakarnikas, but there is a kingdom called Kalinga, which is advanced, and that's why it's a kingdom. And what did they do? Well, they already have horse riders coming to and fro. They planned in such a way that some people are coming from the kingdom towards Kurukshetra and some people are going backwards. So there is always information relay. So they had different techniques. The technique and the methodology could be different, but the concept is still the same.
Yes.
Even now, if you travel, you're always messaging, oh, I reached Hyderabad, I reached Vijayawada, I reached Coimbatore. I'll be there by 2:00. Why? To keep them abreast of updated, right? So similarly, there were plans in a different way. Horse riders were going to and fro through the villages, informing everybody that, hey, we have entered second day. Yes, it could possible that they were getting a day's delay information, but at least the information was reaching to them. The second example I gave was when Chitrangad, who is Mitrajit's friend in this book, gets injured in the war, right? And he sees that the Vedics, the medics, sorry, not the Vedics, the medics, the healers in the Kurukshetra war, because there were also medical people who were around in the war to help them, medics, the paramedics and everybody, right? They keep some a kind of a graft is what I call on the skin, and that kind of absorbs the medicine through the skin and heal them. And people shouldn't be surprised with that, because we have heard about Sushruta and doing nose transplants and etc. So there were advancements. So just healing a wound would have been a simple job for them at that time, right? So I wanted to showcase few things by showing that, oh, things were different at that time, and that's what these Ustrakarnika's tribe were surprised to see. Oh, you can put a pad and patch, a healing patch, and it will heal. Oh my goodness, is it possible? Because even for the people within India at that time who weren't developed that much, it was a surprise. And that's what happens, right? So I wanted to bring that advancements and people who didn't have the knowledge to say that, oh, this could happen. So that was the idea. So yes, there were advancements. I mean, if you talk about weaponry and all that in the war too, we may not understand, we cannot conceptualize right now. And that's why I gave the example of try to explain mobile phone to your grandfather or somebody from 1700s. They cannot understand what's going on. So we may not be able to understand how those weapons were used at that time. But at least we should appreciate that they had the concept, they had the way it's written. Somebody was able to explain what happens, the effect of those concepts, the astras, for example. And they were so clear. This astra creates this. This astra creates this. Brahmastra creates this. There is no coming back for this astra. Right? So there were so many clear explanations that were given. So which we should appreciate, that there were advancements, and which we cannot understand right now, is my thinking of when we look at those things. I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful, wonderful. Indeed, it must have been like that. Otherwise, I mean, you have findings of chariots, excavations of chariots coming up, things like that. Definitely, we must have been far more advanced than we can imagine today. So,
absolutely, and we have some live examples too, right? Like Kailash Temple, for example, in Lahore is a more recent one.
brilliant.
But even within India, if not within India, let's go outside of that. We say pyramids are 10,000 BC. Like, how are they built? Well, I mean, we cannot conceptualize how they were built, but at that time it would have been a common thing because they were advanced. Similarly, in future, people may never understand what plastic is because we are banning plastics. They will never understand there was a concept like plastic. You could just hold everything in one bag. No, they cannot. They will not understand it, right? So things evolve, and we will. The way the different civilizations evolve is different from what we can understand and conceptualize right now.
True, true, true. Any 2 or 3 characters as you wrote, how you enjoyed writing those characters that you'd like to elaborate from your book? Sure.
Oh well, I mean, the protagonist Mitrajit, for example, is definitely my favorite character because I feel every person is like him. They're always confused to take a stance, whether I should take a stand or not. Can I be a leader or not? I want to do my work, but I want my family too. Right? My dharma says that I need to go and fight in this war because I need to support my fellow allies, Kalinga people. I need to support Kauravas because they're fighting on the Kaurava side. They're not worried about whether people are bad people. Sorry. They're not worried about whether they're towards good people or bad people. They had to participate because they had their contractual obligations, let's say, right? So they have to work. So Mitrajit for me is that character where it's like myself too, or one of you. We're always confused whether I need to leave this job and just get back to my place and relax and enjoy, versus no, I still need to do my job because I need to take care of my family. Can I be the person who can step up if my family needs me or not? Right? Can you be the person who can take care of your society as well? So these are the kind of concepts that I liked in that character, and that's what I wanted to kind of portray because they are common people. That's the genuine problems anybody would have, even if you relate Janya Bharata to the current concept. You can easily relate to them because I want to be with my daughter. Can I be? But they have called me for to participate in the war. He's split, right? So, but still, he still takes up that leadership positions. He still works around with that, with the support of others too. So that's one character I enjoy writing. The other character I liked is Virata. Now, Virata, you will see if people have not read it yet. Virata is somebody who is with the protagonist tribe. He also goes to the war, but he always questions, why are we fighting this war? This is not my war. This is something the kings are fighting. Yes, I want to participate too, but why should I fight it? So he has that going on always, that he even questions on the last day before the war, the previous day before the war. He questions his leader and say, why are we doing that? I'm still confused. Though his leader convinces him to say that it is all for dharma, we are here, we have to fight, we have to save our friends, similarly, they will save us in the future. He got convinced, but he still goes away on the first day of the war. He doesn't participate. Why? Because people are there like that. They still want to be away from that. But then at the end in the story, he still comes back to join the tribe. Why? Because he has a guilt that, oh, I left you all guys out, but you're still my family. You're still my people. I'm still, I feel that guilt and come back. So if you look at different characterizations, there are characters who could be weak, but who are weak for a genuine reason. That doesn't mean they're actually weak. They left the war because they want to be with their family. That doesn't mean they're weak. No, they are worried about their family, similar to Mitrajit, but that's where the difference between leadership and a normal person comes. So that's why Mitrajit stays and continues as a leader. Virata leaves, but then he comes back and joins as a lead, as one of the. So that's another character I liked. The other character I enjoyed writing is Chitrangad's character. That's Mitrajit's friend, because not everybody is also worried about war. Because there are some people who are like, let's go and give a fight. Oh, I've been working out for this for a long time. Let's go and give a fight. I know I'm proud of my sword fighting. I'll go and kill thousands of them and come back. There are people like that too. So I wanted to portray that in a character. And I want to add, because I'm talking all about men here, the men in the novel, but in the novel, the women play a huge role.
Yes, yes.
And I wanted to talk about the Purna, the daughter, right? So she has the same questions that anybody would have. Who's going to win the war? Right? First thing, she doesn't want her father to go, and then her father has to go. So for her, she's like, "Will my father win?" And the teacher asks, "Do you want only your father to win, or you want everybody to win? Because there are lives lost too." Right? And then she understands that and says, "Oh yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that." So different characters has different notations I try to give. And yeah, I mean, but those three for me, I enjoyed as a man because I understand those from my perspective. I wouldn't have appreciated much from a woman's perspective, but I tried my best, like how Kumidini, the wife of the leader, takes up leadership role in the village. Because when men are gone, who takes up the leadership roles?
Pillars,
Women have.
Women are pillars of the society.
Exactly. And I wanted to show that our culture was advanced in such a way that they were allowed to take those things.
Fantastic. Yes, I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah.
Wonderful, Andy. So now this leads me to the next question. This is slightly different away from your book. You being in Canada, I mean, away from India, how did your peers, friends appreciate this story? And how do you ensure that you keep the family connected with? Of course, this book itself is in a way a way to connect, but how do you ensure that you connect with our culture?
Well, I mean, for me, it's all about keeping up with the culture. Again, culture is something that I am very appreciative of, irrespective of religion too, because I don't want to step into that.
Yeah, no, that's
culture is what I appreciate and I want to continue. Like, for example, if I am wearing this kurta today, as in pasta, is because I want to appreciate that even if I'm in Canada, I'm comfortable wearing what my ancients, my predecessors were wearing, what my grandparents and parents were wearing. I should be comfortable with that. It's of course appropriate to the situation. And with my kids too, like we celebrate almost every occasion, though it's culturally, of course, through a religious way too, but we also celebrate occasions like Ugadi, which is New Year. We celebrate the Sankranti. We also celebrate, like, for example, the January 1st New Year with everybody.
Yes.
Christmas is huge here. We celebrate that too. But at the same time, Halloween too. But at the same time, we also put deepas out during November. All our Deepavali for Deepavali.
Yes.
So it's making sure that we appreciate the culture and continue the culture. And if we do it, our next generations will continue. So even my kids have grown up here and they're around with many of the non-Indian cultures, etc. By observing us and by following us, they may also continue that. And like, for example, the ideas of Janya Bharata, that the discussions happen at our dinner table when we were sitting around and we were discussing, I got this idea. Do you know there was this Mahabharata? And they have an idea of Mahabharata, not that they didn't, they read.
Very nice.
But then I asked, like, do you know what was happening across India then? What were others doing like us? So it's again having those discussions, having those cultural continuity
Exchanges.
will help them. And non-Indian friends, if you can say, like some of them who read the book, I'm getting some feedback on Goodreads too. Some of them, of course, they didn't understand what's happening. I try to keep it as simple as possible and in English, and people, there is expectation that when it is a fiction story, there is a lot of words, everything masala added to that. And for me, it's like, no, I want it to be as genuine as possible. I
Yes,
want it to
yes.
be as straightforward as possible. Some may not have appreciated, but there were others who were not exposed to Mahabharata or Indian culture.
Mm,
And they were like, I could relate this to what's happening even now currently.
mm,
They took
mm,
example of Russia and Ukraine war. And I'm like, I'm thinking of like, what's happening with the common people who are affected by the war. All the economy went down, gas prices went up. Not even just talking about like the actual war itself, but how it is affecting the other areas too, right? So they were like, I was able to relate to that. And one of them wrote that my father participated in Vietnam War,
mm.
and I could relate to what Purna was going through when Mitrajit was asked to go to and participate in Kurukshetra War, and she
Wow.
was able to relate it to that because it's not about Mahabharata, India. It's the war. That's why my name is Janya Bharata. Yes, it's a common Bharata, commoners Bharata, but it's all concentrating around the war. So what's happening around the war, before the war, and after the war, and
Mm.
during the war, right? So she could relate to that. And so that, oh, my father went to Vietnam War. I could totally relate to what you spoke about it, and how what Purna was going through that. I mean, that's like, for me, I'm satisfied with that kind of feedback, right? Like no matter what happens to this book in the future, but those are the feedback that makes you fulfilled.
Heartening, heartening, very heartening. Very interesting ending. And a few words on how the deluge, your second part, how is it shaping up?
It's
Janya
it's
Bharata, the deluge.
yeah, it's coming up. I mean, when I wrote this book, I wrote it in a such a way that if I'm able to continue Deluge, wonderful. Even if not, if somebody reads till the end of the war book,
Or
it's still a book. Like it can end there,
standalone thing, yes.
stand alone too, if it wants to be. But I had this concept that war doesn't just stops when war ends.
Yes.
There is a lot of effects after the war, and that's why my concept of deluge, and deluge means flood. And without giving more hints into that, if you can find out when a great flood happened after the war, you will get an idea
Wow.
where the story is going to be in my second book.
Okay. 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 Okay.
So, and you know where the story ends, right? so, so the war, so they all go to Dwaraka, and that's
I
where
get.
I'll end. And then the second book is called The Deluge, and it's coming up well. I mean, again, writing something that is so close to our hearts, like Mahabharata, and without changing the what is it, the concepts of that,
Mm.
while not ridiculing it, while not questioning it too much, while presenting it in such a way that people can easily understand too the concept of that. And that's becomes very important too for
Mm.
me. And there is not much of evidence of what happened after the war, because even
Mm.
if you look at Mausala Parva of Mahabharata, the Mausala Parva ends like it's one of the shorter ones, because it finishes. Then they talk more about uh, um, uh, Yudhishthir becoming the king, and then they rule for some time. Not much information there, and then they go to Himalayas at the end. They give up their lives. All those kind of things, right? So it doesn't give much
Mm.
information as much as. So it's a lot of research on my end, and imagination, and trying to link the concepts. But I would say it's almost a third done at this point. I'm hoping by next year, hopefully, I'll be in a position to bring it out too. So soon, coming soon in your nearest bookstore is what I should say.
Yes. 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 Wonderful. And not just the book has a very nice graphic cover. We
Oh
can
yes,
judge this book by its cover too. That's what I can say. It's very attractive and very nicely made. Uh,
yeah. Actually, there is an interesting story on this one too. So when I was trying to make a book cover, again, I'm a self-published author, right? So I reached out to publishers. maybe the concept didn't sync up at that time with everybody, because this is the never written before perspective.
Yes,
So nobody
yes.
would have understood this, that what Mahabharata, and from a commoner's perspective, not even from Duryodhana's side, not from Kunti's side, because that's the common thing that people have been reading about. But no, what was happening from a commoner's side. So when I reached out to one of my cousin's daughter, Anjana Chepur, she's 15, she was 15 at that time, 15 years old. This cover is drawn by a 15-year-old. I just told her that this is a story, and I didn't even finish my story yet. I told the story is a family of 3 people, the protagonist, and they're in a village, they're a tribe, and they have been called upon to participate in Mahabharata war. And she drew the shades of blue on one side, like a village and common, and they are looking very kind of, eagerly towards the war side, and you can see the chariot and the war, and the colors change between these two. And I was so impressed that I thought, you know what, no matter if somebody gives me $1 million image, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to keep this and appreciate her, a child's imagination of coming up with the concept of the book and putting it up. And I wanted to appreciate her work too.
No, it is soulful, very, very soulful. In fact, when I first got in touch with you, I Googled it and I went to Amazon and bought this book. What I loved most was, though the subject is war, it's very, very cheerful, and the way you have taken it, the story, the characters, the way you have built it up, it's very, very nice and thoroughly enjoying. And I certainly look forward for the part 2, Janya Bharata, the deluge, and I hope very soon we'll get to read that. And apart from writing, what else? How do you spend your time, Manuji?
Yeah, I mean, like writing is, again, it's my kind of one of the interests, you can say. Of course, work takes up most of the time, as for all of us too. If you are not professional writers, just writing for a living, we also do other work. So my work takes up most of the time, and then I spend time with kids and family and visit places. And I'm also a singer as a hobby, so I sing some songs sometimes and perform here on stages here around there.
Wow.
And I'm also a RJ. I support our Telugu community here in Vancouver. So we run a program called Neerajanam, a radio program. So I'm also a radio host for that. So few weeks, and they're all available on Spotify. If you search my name and Neerajanam, you can listen to
fantastic them. Fantastic.
So, yeah,
very, very here. Interesting personality, multi-dimensional, multifaceted.
Well, thanks. Nice. I thought I'm able to use those things too, right? Everybody has it, but I'm able to use it. So I'm thankful for that.
A blessing. Yes. And we can we have a question answer session if any of our audience wants to ask a few questions with you, sir?
Yeah, please. Yeah, always welcome.
Yes. Friends, you can ask questions, unmute yourself and ask questions with the author himself. Balaji ji, I think you have a question.
Jaganji, அவர்கிட்ட ஒரே ஒரு கேள்வி.
Yeah.
இப்போ மகாபாரதம் நிறைய பேர் எழுதியிருக்காங்க ரைட்டர்ஸ்.
Yeah.
இதுல இவர் யூனிக்கா என்ன நினைக்கிறாரு, அதர் தென் அவர் காமனர்ஸ் வியூல இருந்து கொடுத்திருக்கேன்றாரு. அதை தவிர இதுல அவர் எழுதியிருக்கிறதுல ஒரு யூனிக்கா ஒரு விஷயம் அவரோட இதுல இந்த ஜான்ய பாரதால என்ன நினைக்கிறாரு, அவர் திங்க் பண்றாருன்றது மட்டும் கேளுங்க.
Manuji, Balaji ji is our eventful Veranda. We have chapters, as I said, we have about 35 chapters. We have one chapter dedicated for events. He's part of our team. So he takes care, volunteers with us for the events, and he's a convener for Eventful Veranda. So he has a very interesting question. Like, so many people have written so much on Mahabharata, things like that. Of course, he understands that you have written from the commoner's perspective. What is the unique thing that you try to communicate? He is asking for him to understand.
Absolutely, Balaji. Balaji ji, thank you very much for that question. Nice to meet you. I understood. I can understand Tamil a bit too, so I understood your question there. So again, yes, it's unique from a commoner's perspective, but I also wanted to present about like keeping ourselves in that role. Like, let's say if you're reading this book, I want you to be taken into that role because you're a commoner too. Yes. So if you read other books, they're always from king's perspective or queen's perspective, those kind of perspectives. Whereas I wrote in such a way that you can feel that you could be Mitrajit. As I mentioned, like which character I like. I could be Mitrajit. I could be Virata too, because I could escape from the war. And you can relate it to any context. Yes, the war is the context here. It could be work. You want to work, but you are always confused at your work. You can use that as a context, right? So there are various ways you can explore that. That's what I wanted to present. And I wanted to present it also from a genuineness. Like, for example, what food were they eating during those times? Right? Kings and queens, they have all these fruits and everything, all rich. What were common people eating? What was their delicacy at the time? So I did research, and I found out that in Godavari River, normally there is a fish, fresh water fish called pulasa at that time. It's called pulasa. Again, based on my research that I could get, again, it's not non-fiction. It's a fictional story. But I went as deep as that and find out like pulasa fish. Oh, maybe because they live near a river, that could be their favorite dish when people meet, right? What kind of, and these are soldiers who would meet before the war. And when soldiers meet, there is always like, what kind of food they would be eating, what kind of drinks. They may also have a drink too, probably. So there were no beer and wine at the time, but some other drinks, right? So before the war. So again, I try to portray it as normal, like when people meet, what happens? When families get torn, what happens, right? And when women are left in the village, when everybody goes out for war, how do they cope up? How do they sustain? Who takes up the leadership position? And what are the hierarchy within that? But how they were still democratized in a way because they were taking input from everybody. There were cultures which are questioned sometimes, right? Like, for example, in puja, everybody sits, women one side, men one side. But in this story, I wanted to present that, yeah, that was common too. But then it was okay when people come together. So wife and husband wanted to sit together in when the puja, when the yagna was happening.
Yes.
That's wonderful too. So I wanted to present it in a genuine way that people can relate to the present conditions. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, in fact, this book is a deep dive into the cultural aspect of how it existed in 3000 or 4000 BC in a way that we can relate to. You have brought it out in a very wonderful and lucid way. It is no complicated writing, no esoteric words, nothing. It is a very, very simple terms and very logical too. It's not something which you cannot refute it. So we have history. To back history, we have geography. And today we have archaeology also to back it up. And then when you have a work like this, it really complements, and basically your Manuji has connected the dots in a very nice way.
Very simple way.
Any other questions, friends? You can ask author himself directly. Well, I think so. It was wonderful program, wonderful interacting with you, Manuji. In the last 1 week or 15 days or so, when I was reading the book, I was looking forward for this program, and it was a thoroughly enjoyable experience. And meeting you today is perhaps a very nice evening for us and morning for you. Very wonderful learning and an experience for all of us. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you sometime for a program in Coimbatore if possible, and probably reading your next book, Janya Bharata, The Deluge. And may you continue writing and glorifying our deep-rooted culture. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Jagannath-ji, and thanks to Verandah Club. Again, it is a genuine effort for me to participate and to provide this fictional information to you through our historical information through fiction. to you all. And I've written it in a very simplistic way, in a simple manner that you all could enjoy. And I hope you can read, because I also wanted my uncles, my aunts in India to read. Also wanted my nieces and nephews in India to read. So I wrote it in a very genuine way, in a very simplistic English, while using words that you all can easily understand and easily connect to. So I hope you all will enjoy, and I appreciate all the blessings I have received so far on this book, and it's available on Amazon for you all for a very nominal price too, because the idea here is to make sure everybody reads this book. And as a self-published author too, it's a huge effort for me. So I hope, and thank you all for this appreciation, and I will definitely connect with you all soon through Verandah Club.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Look
Thank you.
forward. Thank you. Vande Mataram. Thank you.
Thank you.